is fantastic to have Lieutenant General Rick Lynch here and Sarah, his wife, his beautiful wife. You know, I want to read Rick's bio because it's it's really impressive. Like, if I read it all, it would take a while, so I encapsulated a little bit. But 3-star Lieutenant Rick Lynch retired from active duty just in January 2012, so recently retired. Originally from Hamilton, Ohio, graduated from the United States Military Academy and Army War College. And then at West Point, he was a star man, top 5% of his class academically, and top 5 of the 4,000-man Corps of Cadets. Became platoon leader, company commander, and his first platoon sergeant taught him how to listen to subordinates, which he says that he wasn't as good as he thought he was. However, he learned that he loved being around soldiers and their families. Next, received his master's degree in mechanical engineering, focusing on robotics from MIT. Later, as major, he was in Germany when the Warsaw Pact crumbled and saw East Germans experience freedom for the first time. He was then deployed to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, where he was awarded a Soldier's Medal for heroism. Then as colonel, he commanded the Army's first digital brigade, emphasized use of advanced technologies, and had to lead the organization away from how they used to do business. Lieutenant General Lynch assumed command for the 3rd Infantry Division, occupied the worst part of Iraq with 25,000 soldiers. Upon his first return from Iraq, Lieutenant General Rick Lynch assumed command of the 3 Corps and Fort Hood in Texas. His final assignment with the U.S. Army was commanding the Army's Installation Management Command, called IMCOM, and being the Army's Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management, where he's responsible for 120,000 employees. So, there's only 50 3-star generals, and he was one of them for a long time. So, a fantastic mentor to me in the short time that we've got to know each other, and I think you'll enjoy his leadership principles. So, welcome.
Every time I hear my bio, I'm more impressed with myself. So, could you read that again? No? When I introduce myself, I don't talk about being Lieutenant General Lynch. I don't talk about all the opportunities I had in the United States Army to serve. I introduce myself as Sarah's husband and the father of Susan and Lucas. And you'll get that theme over the course of the next few minutes I have a chance to talk to you, because candidly, I think the most important thing is your family. My priorities in life have always been my relationship with God, number 1, my family, number 2, and my profession, number 3. Those priorities have served me well over my adult life. So I'm always focused on the family in everything that I do. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, that's truly the most important thing. It really is. My book that I read a lot and I talk to people about a lot, it's my favorite book. It's a book entitled The Life God Rewards by a guy named Bruce Wilkinson. And in general terms, the author says God doesn't care how many stars you attain or how much money you make. God cares about how many people you've touched over the course of your life. And you're touching folks around you on a daily basis, and your family's most close. So I'm Sarah's husband and the father of Susan and Lucas. Has anybody read Friedman's latest book? It's entitled That Used to Be Us. I'd encourage that you read that if you get a chance. Thomas Friedman, he's written a lot of things over the years, but this one is very, very powerful. And what he does is he talks about our nation the way it used to be. He talks about our nation the way it is. And he talks about our nation the way it should be. And the recurring theme throughout the book is it's all about leadership. It's all about leadership. When we were strong as a nation, it's because we had strong leaders. When we're struggling as a nation, it's because we have less strong leaders. And that's an important point. So one of my passions since I retired is to share leadership lessons learned. Things that I learned over 35 years in the military, 4 years at the military academy, things that I've learned in all of my positions, and I've tried to capture those in Lynch's leadership principles. Now, candidly, we started coming down here in 1993. Sarah and I did when I was battalion commander up at Fort Hood, Texas. Has anybody been to Fort Hood, Texas, or knows where it is? So generally we have a total of 16 years assigned to Fort Hood, Texas. I was a dashing young captain when I first met and married Sarah. And a lot of our career has been around Fort Hood in close proximity to San Antonio. So starting in 1993, we started coming down here and staying at the Westin. And every time we come down, we're more impressed. Over the last year and a half, under Bill's leadership, I've seen market improvements. I've seen market improvements in all aspects. And Bill and I had a chance over our time together to talk about leadership, and we found that we're kindred spirits. A lot of things we talk about, I think it, he says it, and vice versa. So, sir, thanks for this opportunity. And what I want to do is share those 9 principles. And I asked Bill to pass them out to give you something to look at while I'm talking and maybe make some notes on it if you chose to. Some of the things I'm going to say may resonate with you. If you think about the career that Bill described, starting as a platoon leader at Fort Hood, Texas in 1977 with about 30 people, and ending with the Command of Installation Management Command with 120,000 people, I had a great opportunity to touch folks at all different levels. So let me walk our way through these leadership principles and make points as we go. Firstly, to lead is also to serve. You're all leaders in your own capacity. What I get concerned about sometimes is folks get fixated on this idea of leadership like it was about them. It's not about them. It's about those you serve, your subordinates. To lead is also to serve. The phrase that I coined was look down, not up. Here's what I worry about, and I saw this throughout my career. A lot of leaders were so worried about how they looked, how they appeared to others, and what their bosses were thinking about what they were doing, they lost focus on the most important thing, which is their subordinates. You have to focus on your subordinates. You have to look down, not up. The phrase that's captured there has been attributed to many people over time, but I attribute it to my wife, because she's the one that told it to me the first time. People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's just a true statement. I saw it throughout the course of my career. Some leaders who would mouth the words, I care about my subordinates. Some leaders who would carry around cards and talk about their leadership philosophy, but in turn, it was all words and not deeds. And if you don't think that your subordinates can see that, you're missing the boat. In the United States Army, our youngsters out there have different ranks. Does anybody know anything about the military? I don't want to bore you with military lingo, but in general terms, you have privates at the bottom of the echelon, and you have generals at the top of the echelon, and a bunch of people in between. But in general terms, I always would focus on the young privates. And I'd make sure that they knew that I was focusing on them as well. As a Corps commander, a Corps is 63,000 soldiers. It's led by a lieutenant general, and there's only about 50 of them throughout the Army. So when I was at Fort Hood, Texas, every Wednesday, I'd get the new arrivals to Fort Hood together. And there was always about 500 folks and their families. And I would call out into the audience, how many of you are 17 years old? And as amazing as it is, we've been at war now for 10 years, as amazing as it is, there was always 6 or 7 17-year-old men or women in the audience. Their mom and dad had to sign a piece of paper allowing them to come in the military, but by golly, they decided to join our nation's military while our nation was at war. So I'd look out in the audience, I'd see those 6 hands, and I'd select one. I'd say, come forward. And they'd come forward very sheepishly, as you'd imagine, because they're a youngster, 17 years old, and there's 500 people in the audience. The youngster comes up, and I put my arm around him like I tend to do, and I look in the eye and I say, well, how old are you? And he gave me that same exact look that our teenage kids would give us when I'd ask silly questions. Well, General, I'm 17. That's why I'm standing up here. Okay? Well, how old do you think I am? And I always got a chuckle out of the crowd and a little bit of sweat off the 17-year-old youngster. And he got to think about the appropriate answer. And sometimes the youngster would say, well, General, I think you're 35. And I really liked that answer until Sarah would announce that he must be dyslexic because he's got his numbers from me. At the time, I was indeed 53. So I turned to the youngster and I said, what's the difference between you and I? And I was looking for a mathematical answer. And he was struggling with the difference between 53 and 17, which might be an indication of our education system in our high schools, right? Finally, the collective group would come up with the answer, 36. So I'd look at the youngster and I'd say, you know, the only difference between you and I is 36 years of life. So in those 36 years of life, I have 36 years of education experience that you don't have, and that's why I'm the general and you're not. But I'm no more important to the team than you are. And I'd rip off his rank, and I'd rip off my rank, and I'd put my 3 stars on him, and I'd put his private insignia on me, and we'd take a picture. And I'd send that picture to his mom and dad. And I'd say, your son or daughter was so impressive that as soon as he got here, we put him in charge. I didn't tell him it only lasted for 30 seconds. But the point to the story is that youngster was as important to that 63,000 person corps as I was. It's the same in your environment. See, I always worry about that. I worry about leaders who get the big head and say, okay, it's all about me. Look at me. I've risen to this level, and now we can just worry about what's about me. It's not. You got to look down, not up. And you got to prove to your subordinates that you truly care. And once they're convinced that you truly care, then they'll listen to you. So, so very important. The second one, decide when to decide. Now, you all are leaders in some form or fashion here at the Westin. And as a result of being a leader, you have a requirement to make decisions. That's one of the things that leaders do. Whether it's a small decision or a big decision is really a function of the time and circumstances. But what I worry about, and what I saw throughout my career, in some cases, leaders would decide prematurely. Leaders would decide prematurely. What would happen is they'd feel the rush to make a decision. They have all their subordinates saying, I need a decision, I need a decision. So they would succumb to the pressure and make a decision that most of the time proved to be the incorrect decision. So as a leader, regardless of what level, you have to decide first when to decide. And what I always argue is take as much time as you possibly can. And solicit feedback from all sorts of different people. Because just like I said at the beginning, they have good ideas. They have contributions to make. They have insights that you need. And candidly, based on their day-to-day operations, they probably know a lot more about what's going on than you do. So you have to take time to solicit their feedback. And oh, by the way, you got to take time to decide when you should decide. It's just so, so very important. As you would imagine, I had to make a lot of decisions over the course of my military career. One happened in 2006. I took command of the 3rd Infantry Division in Fort Stewart, Georgia. We thought that we had 6 months to prepare to go back into Iraq. We thought we were going to go into northern Iraq, which is the most peaceful part of Iraq at the time. When President Bush announced the surge, he was talking about the 3rd Infantry Division by division. So rather than have 6 months to go into northern Iraq, we ended up having 6 weeks to go into southern Iraq. Rather than go into the most peaceful part of Iraq, we were going to the most hostile part of Iraq. So I, as the leader, I had to make some decisions. I had a plan to train the division for combat over a 6-month period of time, and I only had 6 weeks. So what decision do you think I had to make? Exactly. If the Army says, General, to go to Iraq, you and your staff need to be able to perform these 137 things, and you thought you had 6 months to train for 137 things, but now you only got 6 weeks, you have to prioritize. So what I decided to do is to focus on these 36 tasks, what I considered, based on my experience, to be the most important 36 tasks, and we focused on those tasks. And when we got into theater, we had more time, we focused on the rest of the tasks as well. So decisions are critical. Take the time to decide. Decide first when to decide. And take time to think. You got to be honest with yourself. You know, I believe the most important piece of furniture in your home is your mirror. Now, I made the mistake of asking the youngsters what they thought was the most important piece of furniture, And you imagine their answers. Well, General, clearly it's the refrigerator because that's where I keep my beer. Well, General, clearly it's my bed because that's where I spend most of my time. General, clearly it's my television because that's where I get to watch my shows. I don't believe that's true. I believe as a leader, the most important piece of furniture in your house is your mirror, and you should routinely assess how you're doing. I mean, to understand how you're doing as a leader, there's a lot of opportunities for input. I mean, I'm sure Bill routinely, as he talks to his subordinate leaders, tells you how he thinks you're doing. That's interesting. I'm hoping that each of you together tell yourselves how you think you're doing, because that's how high-performing teams get better. I'm hoping that routinely you're asking your subordinates how you're doing. Just like Mayor Ed Koch did in New York City, how am I doing? Right? I used to ask that question all the time. And you have to ask yourself the question as well. And do that in the privacy of your home by looking in a mirror. Tonight I'd ask you to ask this question. How much time are you giving yourself to think? I mean, if you're a leader and you're required to make a decision that affects people's lives. Now, my last job was 120,000 people worldwide running all the installations. So I did a lot of stuff outside of combat. On every military installation, and the Army's got 163 of them worldwide, there are lodging facilities, there are homes, there are restaurants, there are grocery stores, there are PXs, lots of things out there. So I had to decide what we were doing on those installations, a lot of what you're doing now. But what you got to think about is, are you taking the time to think? Has anybody studied the Franklin Covey time management techniques? If you have, raise your hand just so I get a sense. Okay, I made every subordinate who ever worked for me take the class. And you can do it off the web, it's webinar based, whatever it might be. Because the difference between an extremely effective organization and a marginally effective organization, I believe, is time management. I really do. So the Franklin Covey presentation goes like this. What do you think is urgent and what do you think is important? And that divides time management into 4 quadrants. Quadrant number 1 is everything's urgent and everything's important. Now, does that sound familiar in any place you've ever been in the past? I just left the Pentagon, and in the Pentagon, every day was quadrant 1. Every day we had a crisis. What are we going to deal with today? And you come in that day thinking that you're going to deal with this thing, and something bad would happen, and you find yourself in quadrant 1. This is urgent, and this is important, so stop everything else and focus on that. Now, when that happens, what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice everything else, but you sacrifice time to think. So what happened in the Pentagon, and this is a true story, and it wasn't just me, it was all the leaders in the Pentagon. We were so darned busy moving from one place to another place in the Pentagon, one meeting to another meeting in the Pentagon. As we're walking from one meeting to the next, there'd be some subordinate, in my case a colonel, who'd walk with a binder, and he'd talk to you while I was moving to the next meeting and said, General, when they ask this question, say this, right? And when this slide comes up, here's the facial page, so you should say these things. And that's driven by a lack of time to think. Stay out of quadrant 1, give yourself time to think. What I found in my last organization is we spent a lot of time in quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 is where everything is urgent, but it's not important. Think about that, right? I saw it all the time. What are you doing there, young man? Well, I'm preparing a report. Why are you preparing that report? Well, I'm not sure. We've always done it this way. We've always prepared this report. What are you doing there, young lady? I'm going to a meeting. What's the purpose of the meeting? Plan the next meeting, right? That's quadrant 3, where you're focused on things that are urgent but aren't even important. Where you want to be as an individual, as an organization, is quadrant 2. So you can focus on important things that aren't urgent. And that gives you time to think. So if you're going to be a leader, and you're all leaders, and you're going to have to make decisions, you're going to have to decide when to decide, you're going to have to solicit everybody's input, and you've got to take time to think. Does that make sense? Number 3. Importance of engaged leadership. You guys know I did a test. I spent 4 years in Iraq. in Iraq, you can't drink alcoholic beverages. It's called General Order Number 1. We don't drink while we're in theater. And I had a year in Kosovo, and I couldn't drink there either, and a variety of times I was in that situation. What I found was, when I went for an extended period of time and didn't drink alcohol, I didn't need glasses. My eyesight improved. But as soon as I come back to the States, I start drinking again, and I need my glasses. Right now, I wish I had my glasses because I can't read that small print. But I think I can do. Yeah, the importance of engaged leadership. I think now they're filming this, and the last thing I want is me wearing women glasses on this film. The importance of engaged leadership. What is an engaged leader? What do y'all think is an engaged leader? Caring, passionate, involved. The line is, and I believe this is true, that you should love your subordinates like you love your own children. I believe to lead is also to serve. I believe there's an error, like Bill said, there's an importance of passion and compassion in there. I referred to my soldiers my entire career as my children. And I loved them like I loved my children. That's what leaders do. Okay, I didn't hear the word I was looking for when you described engaged leaders, but here's the word I wanted to hear. An engaged leader is inquisitive. I mean, if you love your subordinates like you love your children, you got to get deeply involved in their lives, not just at work, but also at home. Now, is there a fine line in there that you don't want to cross, invasion of privacy? Sure there is. But if you want to make sure you're taking care of your subordinates, you have to be an engaged leader. Engaged leaders ask intrusive questions. Right now, I'm convinced, because you're dealing with people, you have subordinates who are struggling. They're either struggling with personal issues, medical issues, financial issues, familial issues. We in the Army are experiencing a high rate of suicide. And every time there's a suicide and we do the investigation of the reasons for the suicide, what jumps out loud and clear is failed relationships. Failed relationships. And components of the failed relationship are always finances and drugs and alcohol. Engaged leaders see that coming. Before the individual kills himself, the engaged leader, because they asked intrusive questions, takes their subordinate to get the appropriate help. We don't see much of that in the U.S. military. Candidly, now that I'm out amongst you all, I don't see a whole lot of that out here as well, but it's important. Some leaders in the United States Army say, well, I'm only leading during the duty hours. Right? That's the only time I'm leading. And in the evening, I'm not going to lead. I'm going to allow the youngster to do his own thing, and then tomorrow we won't get back together again. It doesn't work that way. In the United States Army, our single soldiers reside on post in things called barracks. And at Fort Hood, Texas, I love going through the barracks. When I go back as a Corps commander, the first weekend I go through the barracks. And I have with me my Labrador Retriever. We have 2 Labrador Retrievers, an 8-year-old chocolate female named Maggie, and a 2-year-old chocolate female named Bailey. And I do indeed like my dogs more than I like most people. I do. Maggie would go into the barracks with me. That was powerful. First off, she just liked being in there, right? Seeing people. Does anybody have Labrador Retrievers who've been around them? They just like being around people. They're always happy to see them. So I'm walking through the barracks with Maggie. Maggie's very happy that I'm walking through the barracks. What do the soldiers think? Yeah, they think the general's walking through the barracks with a drug dog. I mean, Maggie could care less whether or not they were using drugs candidly. She was just with me. That first weekend at 3 Corps, 64,000 soldiers, as I walked through the barracks, the senior person I could find was a private. Because the leaders had convinced themselves that they were too busy to come in the evening and take care of their soldiers. And I got all the leaders together on Monday and talked about this. Well, General, we're all deployed and we're coming back and we got to focus on our own families. That's why We had spikes in domestic violence. We had spikes in suicide. We had spikes in all sorts of bad things. And as soon as I got the leaders of the Corps back focused on engaged leadership, all those things went down. We had the best safety record for any installation in the Army. We had the lowest rate of suicides. We had the lowest rate of domestic violence. We had the lowest rate of any kind of problems because I forced the leaders to be engaged. So you got to demand engaged leadership. And you got to love your subordinates like you love your own children. I think that's a requirement to be an effective leader. The next one. Focus on opportunities, not obstacles. Abraham Lincoln said, a man's about as happy as he sets his mind to it. I see a lot of leaders walking around dwelling on why things can't be done. Well, that ain't going to happen, General. There's just no way. We don't have this resource. We don't have this time. We don't have these people. And if you got that mentality, you'll never get it done. It'll never happen. Never happen. You've already guaranteed failure because you focused on the obstacle. I believe leaders got to focus on the opportunity. For everything you do, there's an opportunity. And if you have that mental attitude, what's going to happen is you're going to accentuate the positive. All your youngsters are going to be with you to accentuate the positive. It'll get done. It will get done. Against all odds, it'll be completed because you focused on the opportunity and not the obstacle. And this was very important to us on each of my tours into Iraq. Because as you imagine in combat, there's lots of things that jump up unexpected. You know, we say in the Army, you got to fight the enemy, not the plane. A lot of times what happens in the military, and I find this in corporate world as well, people come up with a plan and work that plan regardless of what really is happening, right? Regardless of what really is happening. You got to focus on opportunities and not obstacles. This one's going to be a struggle for some folks, but I believe it's imperative. Is it possible, as you deal with your subordinates, to be demanding but not be demeaning? Of course it is, right? Sometimes people want to be that leader that's just loved. I want to be the loved leader, right? And sometimes to be the loved leader, you're allowing things to happen that you know shouldn't happen. You're allowing people not to perform to their full potential because you want to be the loved leader. And if you do that, you're just going to be a lot less effective. It's just a true statement. If you focus on being demanding and not being demeaning, you'll be loved. Because your subordinates will see the effectiveness of the organization by God. They'll be proud of that. They'll say, this is the right thing to do. To be demanding, do you have to be a yeller and a screamer, or that kind of person? Of course not. Can you talk to your subordinates in a polite, cordial fashion and still get the point across that maybe you don't think they're performing to their potential? Can you do that? Sure you can. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm asking you to think about this tonight when you're looking in the mirror. How well are you doing counseling your subordinates? In the military, sometimes the phrase counseling has a negative connotation. Oh my God, I'm being counseled. What'd you do wrong? I don't know, he told me he's going to counsel me. What'd you do wrong? Counseling is indeed positive if done correctly. Everybody that's ever worked for me has been counseled by me once a month in writing. And in the counseling session, I use a blank sheet of paper, and at the top it's areas, it's strengths. And you always talk about the strengths first. Let's talk about how great you're doing. Let's talk about the great things you're doing. Get it up on a positive beat. And then the next block is called areas for improvement. It's not weaknesses. It's not labeling the individual as a weak person. It said, okay, here's areas for improvement that if we work together, we can ensure better performance. And then the last block is objectives. What are we going to agree on that we're going to do over the course of the next 30 days to bring this organization to the next level? What are we going to do? Has anybody found one of your employees to be the person who comes to work and his plan is, I'm just going to screw up today. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make all sorts of mistakes. I'm going to screw everything up, and then I'm going to go home tonight and come in tomorrow and do it again. Has anybody got one of those people? Because I've never seen that person. Now, do people make mistakes? Sure they do. Do you make mistakes? Sure you do. Do I make mistakes? Ask Sarah. All the time. All the time. But if you get this attitude where everybody's trying to be the best they can, then you're going to become a high-performing organization. And the way you do that is you start at the individual level. And the way you do that is counsel. And if an individual's not performing, what do? You counsel them some more. Maybe you got to send them to training. Maybe you got to give them some time to go do something else. Maybe you got to move them around. Who's read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins? Amazing book. If you get a chance to read it, I'd read it. Jim says generally, as you lead an organization, it's not so much about where the bus is going, but you have the right people on the bus, and are they on the right seat in the bus? Just think about it. Right people on the bus, right seat on the bus. What else does he say about the bus?
Right direction.
Drive the right direction based on your campaign plan and your strategy, but he says sometimes you got to get people off the bus, right? But do you automatically say, okay, you got to get off the bus? Of course not. What do? You set them down, you talk to them, you counsel them, you give them some additional training, you love on them a little bit more, you see what's going on in their lives and maybe affecting their performance. And at the end of the day, they'll improve and your organization will improve. It's really that important. You have to focus on that direction. So you can be demanding, but not be demeaning. Be a mentor. Who here knows what a mentor is? What is a mentor? Sorry? What's the role of a mentor? Do you have to be the person's supervisor to be that person's mentor?
No.
Can you mentor people that aren't even at all in your chain or in your specific sphere of influence? Of course you can. We in the military, we're struggling. In 2001, prior to 9/11, we had this mass exodus of captains. Captains are the kids who've been in the Army 3 to 5 years. They were all leaving the Army. So we formed this blue ribbon panel, and we talked to the captains and said, why are you leaving the Army? You know what they told us? Nobody's talking to us. Nobody's talking to us anymore. You know, I was in, and Sarah was there with me, in Fulda, Germany in 1989 when the wall came tumbling down. We were there, as Bill mentioned, where I could watch the East Germans experience freedom for the first time as they came into West Germany. It was an amazing thing. They came across in these long line of Fred Flintstone cars. They're called Trabants. It was an amazing thing. And then you go into East Germany, you see the stark difference between a free society and a not free society. It's an amazing thing. And that was a wonderful day, November 9th, 1989. But I'm convinced that day, when the Warsaw Pact crumbled, they left two things to screw with us. The first is PowerPoint slides. Now, I don't know if you all are addicted to PowerPoint slides, but I do find organizations addicted to PowerPoint slides. It's an amazing thing. People spend so much time making the fancy slide with all the right colors and the dancing electrons that they put zero time into thinking what the slide said, right? So I think that's an evil thing. That's why I'm allergic to PowerPoint slides. And I also think the Warsaw Pact left another thing to mess with us, and it's called email. I believe email is evil. I really do. People think that email is communication. Email is not communication. Email is typing and sending. You don't know if the person received the email. You don't know if the person understood the email. You don't know if the person got the emotions behind the email you're sending. But what's happening now is people are defaulting to email as a form of communication. And that just can't be. Best communication is what?
Face-to-face.
Face-to-face, right? If you can't do it face-to-face, what's the next best thing?
Phone.
Telephone. At least you got the human connection with the voice. Now, I'm convinced these days that the youngsters don't realize that you can actually talk into those devices called phones. Because we're so fixated on searching the web and texting each other. And with my son, it's an amazing thing. And you see it all the time. You see two people sitting together texting each other. You got to wonder about that. You know? Just open your mouth, talk to them, talk to them. But we got to continue to work towards communication. And indeed, if you spend less time on email, more time talking, you'll be effective. To be a mentor, I believe you got three criteria. These captains who were leaving the Army said nobody's talking to me. They said, 75% of them said, I don't have a mentor, I want one. When we talked to the senior leaders in the Army, 75% said we're mentors. There's a disconnect. And I'm convinced the disconnect is a lousy definition of what a mentor is, so I made up my own. Right? Here's what I believe. A mentor is defined as these three criteria. A mentor is somebody who's accessible, mentor is somebody who listens, actively listens, and a mentor is somebody who truly cares. You're accessible, you listen, and you truly care. Now, if you declare yourself to be a mentor, but somehow you barricaded yourself from those folks who want to be mentored, you're not accessible and you're less effective. If you're declaring yourself to be a mentor, and in the session you're having with the person being mentored, you're not listening, they know you're not listening. You see that all the time in your human interactions over the course of the day. You know when somebody's listening to you or not listening to you. You know when somebody's actually there focused on what you're saying, and there's or other folks that are there, but they're thinking about something else while you're talking. So you got to be an active listener, and you got to truly care. If you're a leader, I believe this is true. There is no such thing as a casual conversation. If your subordinates say, I need help with this, there's an expectation you're going to do something with what they told you. I mean, if you're simply saying, I really care about you, how can I help? And they say, I need help with this, and you say, okay, but you don't do anything, you've lost all credibility as a leader. All credibility as a leader. So I believe that if you want an organization to be a high-performing organization, you got to be a bunch of mentors, and the people got to know that you're active mentors, and you got to have mentees who want to be mentored. Does everybody want to be mentored? So if you think everybody wants to be mentored, raise your hand. Okay? Can you coach everybody into wanting to be mentored? I see some yeses, I see some no's. I believe yes. I believe yes. I believe in the intrinsic value of the human being. I believe that the human being wants to be the best they can be. I don't care your role in life. I believe that that human being wants to be the best. That's what I believe. And I haven't been proven wrong in that yet. My dad worked at a paper mill in Hamilton, Ohio. He worked shift work 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. My mom worked at the same paper mill. So they were pure blue-collar workers, but they wanted to be the best they could be. They just needed somebody that would mentor them, to teach them, to coach them, and who truly cares. I think that's critical. And I'd ask yourself to give yourself a grade on how you're doing as a mentor. If you declare yourself a mentor, are you really having those criteria? Number 7, always celebrate diversity. If you want to be an ineffective leader, surround yourself by a lot of people just like you. It's an amazing thing to me. I see this all the time. If you want to have a wonderful day, if you want to have no friction, no conflict, if you want to have a situation where everybody agrees with you all the time, then surround yourself with people like you. But you'll be almost ineffective. Almost ineffective. In 1982, Sarah and I were fixing to go get married. Does everybody know what fixing to means? And I was the chief of staff of KFOR in Kosovo for a year. This is pure diversity here. And I had a 600-man staff in 29 different nations. I had 7 general officers that worked for me. I was the only American. I had a French general officer, a German general officer, a British general officer, and on and on. After 2 weeks of me being there in charge, the French general came to my office and says, General, we have a problem. I said, what is the problem? He says, well, to be in this NATO command, we're all required to speak English. But we have no idea what you're saying. You're using words like fixing to and y'all. We're about as confused as we can be. So always got to check with the audience to see whether or not you can relate to the word fixing to. But anyway, so Sarah, everybody's okay with fixing to, right? So I continue my story. Sarah and I were fixing to go get married. But you had to have a chaplain. You know, it's a requirement somehow. So we go see this military chaplain. He says, okay, I'll marry you. But before I marry you, you got to take this personality test to make sure you two can indeed have a productive marriage. So we sat down, we took the test, went away, came back the next day, he looked us in the eye and says, whatever you do, don't get married. He said, I've never seen 2 people more diametrically opposed. There's no 2 people in the world who come out so much different on this personality profile, and that's a true statement. But just for meanness and to prove him wrong, we went ahead and got married. And here we are, 30 years later, wonderful daughter, a wonderful son, a wonderful marriage. The point is, you ought to surround yourself by people that are different than you. Now, please don't, if you're single now, run out and find somebody exactly different than you and link up with them. Don't, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. If you simply allow your close inner circle to be people like you, all they're going to do is regurgitate to you what you told them, and you won't grow. You won't grow. So I intentionally select people to be in my inner circle that are different than I am, right? And how can you do that? How do you know that person's different? One of it's obvious, gender, race, whatever it might be. You can have them take personality indicators to get a sense whether they're a EFTJ or IMFP or whatever all that stuff is, whether they're an extrovert or whether they're an introvert. But intentionally find a diverse situation, and you'll be amazed with the power of the diversity. Because you'll get different inputs, you get different ideas. I think we're probably the oldest people in the room. I'm the oldest, but I'll use this as an example. I was the spokesman for the force for a year in Iraq, so I spent a lot of time with the media. I developed a skill set for strategic communication as a result of that, and I've been working that ever since. I went to one of my installations. The garrison commander, a full colonel, was so proud because I was forcing energy conservation. He was so proud that he and his sergeant major, a senior non-commissioned officer, had developed a public service announcement to be played on the local TV station. And he put a lot of effort into it, turning out the lights, big dramatic effect, put a lot of time and effort into it. He said, "Look at this, General, I'm so proud." I said, "That's cool." He takes me to see 600 family members. So it's on my mind, so the first thing I asked was the obvious question. How many of you actually watch the local TV station? 600 people. How many think raised your hand?
0.
2 people? 2 people. The colonel and the sergeant major. I asked the question there that I always ask. If I give you a choice between 3 categories on how you acquire information, where would you be? Category number 1 is you like to acquire information with newspapers and magazines. And that's where I am. I still love the tactile feel. I still love reading the newspaper. Our Labrador retrievers like to retrieve the newspaper and bring it in the morning, So it's all part of our system. I don't like to cruise the internet looking for information. I don't like to do that. So that's category number 1. It's a pretty small group of people. I think it's me and one other guy. I think it's me and one other guy. The second category is TV and radio, and the third category is internet. And we did a detailed study across the Army. What percentage of folks do you think get their information off the internet? 90%. 90%. And they're using, in many cases, this thing called social media. Does anybody know what social media is? Yeah, it's the websites, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's texting, it's all these things that you can do these days. I personally struggle with social media. How do you work around it if you're a leader? Celebrating diversity. You hire people who like social media. For example, everywhere I went as a division commander and a corps commander, I took a reporter with me, a young officer, or a young civilian. And they would listen to me very closely, and over time they started to think like me and write like me and type like I talked. And they did the social media stuff for me. They ran my Facebook. I think when I retired from the military, how many followers I have on Facebook? It was tens of thousands. And they were thinking that I was there every day, kind of typing to them, having a good old time. But I wasn't. This 26-year-old youngster who loved social media was doing it. And then she started getting excited about Twittering and tweeting and all that stuff. And it worked great because I had made a conscious decision to surround myself by people not like me and take advantage of their skill sets. So important. So I don't know how it works within the Westin, but I do know it's important to surround yourself by people that are different character and culture, and as a result of that, you can be more effective. Number 8. So how am I doing on time? Since I retired, I don't even wear a watch. All right. He gave me 4 hours. So
settle in.
This is the one I'm most worried about. Achieving a work-life balance, and that's why I introduced myself as Sarah's husband and the father of Susan and Lucas. There are people, maybe some of you, who say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to work. I'm going to play tomorrow. Here's my plan. I'm going to spend so much time at work. I'm going to spend time with my family tomorrow. Here's my plan. You know, I do love my parents, but I'm kind of busy to call them right now, but I'm going to call them tomorrow. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. It's in the book of James. If you spend some time in the Bible, you'll see God uses the book of James to send us a message. He says, you guys are making me laugh. I'm paraphrasing. It's not really the Bible like that. I'm paraphrasing. Because you spend a lot of time saying, tomorrow I'll do this, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go do this tomorrow, and I'm going to acquire all this wealth. And it makes God laugh because He didn't promise you tomorrow. You all have personal experiences where you wish that you had spent more time with a loved one before they passed. You have that. I know you do. I gave a presentation at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. About 500 people in the audience, and I'm talking about work-life balance. I'm talking about if you love somebody, tell them. I'm talking about if you've wronged somebody, fix that wrong today. I'm talking about if you love somebody, spend time with somebody. And in the audience was a mother and her daughter. And they both worked for me on that garrison. They left the audience, they left the presentation, and they committed to spend more time with each other. And they did for a week. At the end of 1 week, the daughter died. 32 years old, the daughter died. And to this day, the mother contacts me to tell me thank you for that 1 week. Because at least they had that 1 week. I worry about folks like us. I mean, you wouldn't be a leader if you weren't effective and probably type A. You wouldn't be, right? You wouldn't be. And sometimes we get so immersed in what we're doing, we sacrifice the important things, which is the family and the friends and the loved ones. I gave this presentation out in Las Vegas, and a youngster in the audience made it a point to go call his grandfather, from whom he had been estranged for the last 10 years. And those two connected. I'm convinced you can do it all. You can work hard, and you can play hard. You can be the best at what you do at work, and you can be the best at what you can do at home. You can have that work-life balance if you approach it in that attitude. If you realize that your family and your friends and your work life and your life outside of work is as important as your work life. You can do it both. I told you my priorities have been my relationship with God, number one, my family, number two, my profession, number three. It served me well. I did okay in the United States military. But I tell you, people say, well, General, that had to be hard when you retired. You were a general for 10 years. Well, that may have been hard if my identity was the general. My identity was Sarah's husband and the father of Susan Lucas. And when all the parades were done and all the medals were given out, I still had my family. Because I made a point over the course of my life to focus on my family. So I'd ask you to think about there's a whole series of ways to ensure work-life balance. But the most important thing you got to do first is commit to it. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself how you're doing with the important things in life. I'm a man of faith. My mom passed away 3 years ago. And I believe that Mom, when she passed away, she went to heaven, and I believe she's here in spirit. I believe that's true. My dad, unfortunately, does not believe it. My dad believes that my mom is buried in some plot of ground in Hamilton, Ohio. So every time I go home, like we did last weekend, Dad says, let's go see your mom. Because he thinks she's buried out there. And as much as I try to talk him around that, he just won't get off of that. So I take him up there. When you walk through a graveyard, a cemetery, what do you see? See a bunch of tombstones. What's on the tombstone? A start date and an end date, right? The year you were born and the year you died. What's in the middle? The dash. So you got to ask yourself all the time, how are you living your dash? Right? Because you've got an end date, but you just don't know what it is right now. So if you're always thinking about, how am I living my dash? Am I truly living my day-to-day activity, my dash, in a manner in which I'd be proud? I'd ask you to consider that. And I'd ask you to think about this whole idea of work-life balance because it's so important. You can indeed do both. And how are you living your dash? And this last one, I'm convinced you all are doing very well because I see it. You know why I like coming to the Westin? And I've been doing it now since 1993. You know why I like coming to the Westin? happy people. Right? Service-oriented people. People who truly want to make your stay at the Westin most enjoyable. And it's from the time you pull your car up and the guy grabs your car keys, through the registration desk, to the guy going taking you up to your room, and throughout your stay. It's an amazing thing to me. And I've been all around the world with my beautiful wife, and I haven't seen anything like the Westin. So I'm convinced this last one I'm talking about, you're already doing. Having fun. See, if this is indeed your last day, and it might be. Remember, I live every day like it's my last day, because it might be. And you're not having that fun on that last day, what a tragedy. What a tragedy. You made a conscious decision to give up your last day. More importantly, as a leader, if you're not having fun, your subordinates aren't having any fun. I mean, if you're walking around kicking rocks and complaining, and, oh my God, this is too hard, and I hate the weather, and I hate my commute, everybody around you is going to be having a bad day. Everybody. Everybody's going to be having a bad day. So you got to be thinking about that. If you're upbeat, positive, excited, everybody around you will be upbeat, positive, excited. It's contagious. If you're negative, everybody around you will be negative. Sarah's taught me a lot over the years, 30 years together. She's taught me a lot. She's an educator by profession. She's taught at all levels to include teaching in the 4th grade. And she taught me this thing called the popcorn effect. Does anybody know what the popcorn effect is? Okay, if you got a group, let's say you got your subordinates together, and I don't know if you got 3 people or 30 people or 300 people, it doesn't matter. But if you got all your subordinates together, you're going to fix it, and you're fixing to have a conversation. And if you let the first person say something negative, every conversation will be negative. It's the popcorn effect. I see it all the time. You know, you got an audience out there, one person raises their hand and says, well, I want to complain about this. Everybody's mind switches to the negative. All right, you think that was bad, let me tell you this. You think that's bad, let me tell you this. It's an amazing thing. At Fort Hood, Texas, 64,000 soldiers, I could personally attest that every prescription was filled in less than 30 minutes. I could attest to that because we got counters there. You know, it's all electronic. So you walk in, you pull the ticket, people know what time you got there. When you're done, they take your ticket, they know what time you left. 90% of prescriptions filled in less than 30 minutes. But I guess sometime in the history of Fort Hood, somebody had to wait 3 hours to get a prescription. So everywhere I go, I hear that story about it takes 3 hours to get your prescription. So really? Well, when did that happen to you? Well, it never really happened to me. It happened to my friend. Well, let's go see your friend. Well, your friend's not here anymore. You know, they've moved on. It's this desire to promote negativity. You can stamp that out as a leader because you can make people accentuate the positive. Are we struggling? I mean, here at the Westin, you have everything you'd like to have. You have all the resources you need. Is the facility exactly the way you want it? Are the people exactly the way you want it? Is the time exactly the way you want it? I doubt that very seriously because this ain't heaven. Right? It's pretty close to heaven. I think the beds are called heavenly beds, right? In the shower called a heavenly shower or something like that. It's probably pretty close to heaven, but I'll tell you, it ain't heaven, right? It ain't heaven. But if you focus on the positive things and say, okay, by the way, we got to work on these things, by God, it'll be more fun, the people around you will be having more fun, and you'll be 1,000 times more effective. Okay, I want to bring this full circle and then see if there's anything you'd like me to talk about. After I retired, we could have made a conscious decision to do nothing but hang out at our swimming pool. We put a swimming pool in our backyard, and the dogs like it a lot. You know, we could be right now hanging out at the pool. But we chose not to because there's things we want to do. I don't use the word retire. I use the word transition. You transition from one form of service to another form of service, and we're Americans. And right now, we as America are struggling. Now, we won't spend any time trying to fix blame as to why we're struggling, but I don't think anybody in this room thinks we're doing things exactly right. We're struggling with the economy. We're struggling with decisions being made. We're struggling. The solution to any problems we have as a nation is effective leadership. And you can't just say, okay, well, that's the president's problem, or that's the Congress's problem, or that's Bill's problem, or it's the general's problem. It's all of our problems. No, I told the members of the military under my command, focus on your piece of the army. Make your piece of the Army right. Be an effective leader for your piece of the Army, and if everybody does that, by God, we'll be effective. It's the same thing here. I don't know if you've got 3 people, 30 people, 300 people under your direct charge. But I do know you're a leader. I do know to lead is also to serve. I do know that there's an expectation that you're the best leader you can be. How are you going to be the best leader you can be? You're going to work hard. You're going to focus. You're going to get training. You're going to try to be the best you can. You're going to solicit feedback from your boss, from your peers, from your subordinates. You're going to look in the mirror. You're going to try to be better. A way to get better is individual learning. I mean, I'm surprised with the lack of literacy in the room, because every book I mentioned, nobody read. So we might want to work on that a little bit. But taking books of a professional nature and read those and learn from those and share is a way to prove to be an effective leader, grow to be an effective leader. So for all of you, thank you for what you do. You are taking this place and making it a wonderful experience for lots of people, to include the Lynch family. And all these great soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who happen to come down to the Riverwalk, they're having a wonderful experience. We're having a hard time as a nation. As you well know, we've been at war 10 years. We believe, the senior military believe, we're going to be at war for 10 more years. What you've done here at the Westin is create an environment where people can achieve some level of peace. They come down and enjoy the weekend. You know, as soon as we're finished here, Sarah and I are just going to enjoy the rest of the time here at the Riverwalk, to enjoy ourselves. And you all make that environment the way it is. So God bless you. And if I can ever be of service, let me know. My email address, for those of you that are interested. Just wait until who's really interested. Somebody said, I ain't going to touch my pen. It's not that interesting. Who knows the show I Love Lucy? So in 1955, when I was born, my mother turned to my grandmother and said, "Why don't you name that boy?" Mom, my grandmother's favorite show was a show entitled I Love Lucy. Who's the lead male character on I Love Lucy? Ricky Ricardo. That's how I ended up being Ricky, no middle name Lynch. That's how I got the name. So the email address is ricky.lynch, 55, the number 55, because I was 55 when I got the Gmail address. ricky.lynch55 at gmail.com. And if you ever run across a circumstance where you're not really sure what to do, or you're kind of confused, or you kind of like some insights, send me a note, because that's what I do. I try to live a life that God rewards. I try to focus on helping others. So, sir, thank you for this opportunity. I've got some more time. I don't know what the time looks like. You want me to take some questions, or if we can even wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, we have some time. So, any sort of questions that anyone has for General Lynch?
Sir.
Sean?
I'm very curious. I think which brings us to hear from you about your most influential mentor.
Yeah. They have excellent question. I have 5 mentors that I have garnered over the course of my military career, and every time I turn to them, they give me advice and counsel based on the circumstances. And as you would imagine, almost all of them are in the military, and many of them retired as 3- and 4-star generals. Fred Franks is one, Butch Funk's another, many names that you would recognize. But what I intentionally did is I sought out those people that I believe were my role models that I wanted to be like. So when I walked into division command, the first time I picked up the phone was to one of my mentors who'd been a division commander. When I got the job as the MCOM commander, which was 120,000 people, $12 billion budget, all civilians worldwide, I reached out to a civilian mentor, a guy named Harold Brack, who's the chairman emeritus of Time Warner Incorporated. And he helped me make decisions. The point is, I've had them too. I reach out to them all the time, and you should as well. And I hope that you do. I hope you have. Thank you. Other questions?
I mean, you've been, to many places and interacted with several different cultures. What's, perhaps the best experience or one of the most needs that always comes to your mind as a great lesson or something that you cherish in the experience?
Yeah, each of my experiences I learn from. We in the military call it experiential learning. You probably do as well. Every time as a general officer I had a job, it was throwing me outside my comfort zone, causing me to do something I'd never done before. When we were talking about this over dinner last night, the job that I think I had the biggest impact on the world was a division commander as part of the surge. They wrote a book about it entitled Surge South of Baghdad. Bill's got a copy of the book. That was indeed, in terms of feeling that I made a difference in the lives of people, was my time in Iraq. I enjoyed studying the different cultures. I enjoyed that time in Kosovo with 29 different nations. And I got to tell you, I enjoyed my 4 years in Iraq. I enjoyed my 4 years in Iraq. Because the Iraqi people are good people. They're just like us. They want freedom from fear. They want to be able to go to work. They want to be able to take care of their kids. They want to be able to pursue their education. There's 16 million Iraqi people. And sometimes we want to paint them all with a brush of being bad people. They're not. There's 10,000 people at any one time in Iraq that are bad people, just like in America, right? It was an amazing thing to me because I was a spokesman for the force. I was trying to tell the story of the progress we were making, and people would talk about the numbers of murders or explosions in Iraq that day. And I kept trying to compare a city in Iraq with a city in America, right? Like on any given day, Detroit had more violence than a lot of places across Iraq. So the Iraqi people, I cherished my time with them. They were indeed a culture who wanted to escape the tyranny of Saddam Hussein and be able to pursue freedom. In Kosovo, with the Kosovo Albanians and the Kosovo Serbians, we were stuck right smack in the middle of that, trying to make sure that they stopped shooting at each other and had a peaceful society that would flourish. So I had a lot of great opportunities, and I couldn't just label one as the most significant. But it goes back to the point of celebrating diversity and understanding culture. I got to tell this story. So I'm in Kosovo. Does everybody remember we actually went to Kosovo? Does everybody know that we're still there? See, that's what worries me. You know, we as a nation have a short-term memory. You send soldiers off into harm's way and we forgot we put them there. Right? We still have a bunch of soldiers in Kosovo. So I was there right in the worst part of Kosovo, right at the worst time. I sat down with the leader of the Albanian clan in Kosovo, and I said, Ramush. His name was Ramush Radnai. He ended up being the prime minister of Kosovo. I said, Ramush, if you'll simply stop shooting at the Serbians, I can probably convince them to stop shooting at you, and we can work together to make this a flourishing society. He looked me in the eye and said, General, the Serbians killed 2 of my brothers and 4 of my cousins. And if you think I'm going to forget that anytime soon, you're clearly mistaken. So I realized then, inside of Kosovo, it was a generational issue. It was going to take generations to work through that. But it was all very fascinating to be able to work through different cultures in different circumstances. Other questions?
Other questions? No. Well, one thing, a short story. Rick really walks the walk. So when he says email, absolutely. When we first got together for breakfast, we did great conversation and whatnot. I was telling him about my transition here with my children, and obviously Sarah and Rick have moved a lot, and obviously parenting is important to them. So I was explaining that my 5th grader Kyle had a little bit of a challenging transition. Danielle, my 9th grader, was doing great, and in Pep Squad, I was really proud of her and whatnot. So he said, what? Can I write him a note and help kind of boost them along? And I'm like, sure, absolutely. So sure enough, like a week or so later, on his 3-star stationery, handwritten note to Kyle, and then a separate one to Danielle, and very personalized. Kyle, I know it's tough to move and leave friends behind, but you're going to be stronger because of it. You're going to grow to love Texas, and then Danielle, your dad told me you're doing great in Pep Squad and you're getting great grades. So he's just really that type of man, and it touches them, and he's obviously been a fantastic leader throughout his career and his service to our countries, and we all thank you for that. But in general, just a fantastic man too. So really happy that you came and shared your stories and principles with us. So.
How do I look? 39 years in uniform, right? Never had to pick out my clothes on any given day. Everything changed on the 1st of January. We went to Men's Warehouse. Sarah helped me pick out some suits. That TV commercial, George Zimmer says, "You're going to like the way you look." I think I look pretty good. How's this look? I'm feeling pretty secure in my masculinity. God bless you all. Thank you very much.